Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. My name is Dr. Edu Weaver. I'm an energy law lecturer here at the University of Aberdeen, specialized in both oil and gas as well as offshore wind risk governance regimes. I'm also the director of the African Energy and Natural Resource Network. The objective today is to examine the pathway to clean economic development through the use of renewables and other clean energy technologies. The conversations around energy initially would start with the issue of energy security, and then we had the dilemma of trying to balance energy security and availability as well as affordability. And it then even moved even further to the energy trilemma, where we started seeing growing concerns around climate change, global warming, and the role of conventional energy sources in that. As I speak, the question is even more complex because we are now dealing with the energy quadrilemma. So there's a fourth element that says even if we do engage in the energy transition, as we see a number of countries already doing, there's also that issue of acceptability, social impact, and also the questions around energy justice. What are the injustices that may arise in that transition? I'm speaking from the School of Law, University of Aberdeen, and here in Aberdeen, this is one of the issues that has been getting significant attention. The question and the issues vary from country to country, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it even evolves and even gets more complex when we begin to look around the geopolitical landscape and how energy politics plays in all of this. That means you may start with the definition of energy transition and watch it evolve over time. And you need not look no further to understand the complexity of the situation. As complex as it is, my job isn't the difficult one. I've got three specialists here to throw their hats in and engage with these issues from their areas of expertise. I will be having with me Uchenna Ibe, who is the business case manager for RWE. I also have Christian Spano, he's the director of Innovation International Council on Mining and Metals. And I've got Dr. Jamie Spears here from the Faculty of Natural Sciences, Center for Environmental Policy at the Imperial College London. They will be dealing with difficult questions, and I will be doing the less complex trouble of asking them those difficult questions. But we try to examine these issues from a variety of lenses and see how we can, in as much as we can, provide some learning points for mature and as well as emerging energy jurisdictions. So let's start off with Uchenna here. Uchenna, if you don't mind, share your slides. Tell us a bit more about yourself and go into your topic for today. Over to you, Uchenna.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And hi, everyone. And thank you very much for having me. And my name is Uchenna Ibe, like is already introduced. And I'm currently the business case manager for RWE. I'm based here in London. My background is in oil and gas and then renewable, started in Nigeria. So I know the jurisdiction very well. I worked in oil and gas in Nigeria for some time before moving to the UK, where I had further studies and then worked in oil and gas in the North Sea and then transitioned to offshore renewable. Today, I'll be talking from that perspective, from what I know about Nigeria and what I know about energy transition and what I know about the global energy trend. Sule, if you just want to share the slides, so I'll be talking through a couple of slides to make my point. Yes, as I said, I'll be talking through a couple of slides, and I've prepared this. I've approached this topic from a perspective of asking a question whether it's actually good or whether it's actually worth it for Nigeria and indeed Africa to really align itself to the global energy trend and the ongoing green energy revolution. You want to go to the next slide? Yeah. And yes, I've asked that question from this perspective, and my own perspective is yes, that we should actually, we as a country, Nigeria, and then as Africa continent, we should actually align ourselves with what is going on globally in terms of energy transition. In as much as we want to do it in our own way, of course, how it is good for us, what we need. But the point is that I believe we should align ourselves. And there is reason why we should do that. There is how we can do that, and the challenges we face, and of course, the example we'll see from elsewhere. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so like I said, why we must do this. There are so many benefits, so many reasons. This is not exhaustive why we must do this. It is an opportunity for us. It's a global trend. I mean, availability of the technology. We're no longer asking about the technology. The technologies are there and they are proven. So we have everything we need. Then there is that commitment of Paris Accord. We are signatory to that accord. We've made commitment even recently, COP26. So we have every reason to really align ourselves. Yes, we will make it specific. Our strategy will be specific to our need in Africa, our need in Nigeria. So we have, it's a very big opportunity for us. It's a new industry. It's an opportunity for us to actually diversify. In fact, currently, myself personally, I don't see energy transition as that transition. I just see it as an opportunity for my country, for my continent to really diversify our portfolio, our energy portfolio. So it's that opportunity for us. And now we have the resources, natural resources we have, human resources we have. I think it's something that is worth us embracing it with every strength and everything we have. You want to go to the next slide, please? Yeah, and then how are we going to do that? We're going to do it, approach it starting from where we are, and then do those things we need to do and head to where we want to be. Where are we currently? We are at the place currently that we have this massive gas reserve. We have energy, we have solar resources, we have wind resources, we have abundant human resources as well. And then we have vibrant youths that are capable of doing all these things. And then where are we heading to? We want a situation where we don't have only that oil and gas in future. We want a situation where our energy system is diversified in terms of the one we export, in terms of the ones we consume locally. We want that diversification. It's good for us. And what are we going to do to get there? We have to, first of all, see this as an opportunity. Like I mentioned before, it's not a kind of it's not a threat to oil and gas. No, I don't see a future, at least not in the near to midterm future. I don't see a future without oil and gas. I see a future where you have that efficient oil and gas operation, where you have that diversified energy system, have different other clean technology in addition to your oil and gas system. So that's how I see it. And that's what I think we should be doing. We should operate our oil and gas efficiently. We should gradually increase the investment, make investment in clean energy and increase that investment over time. We should invest in research and capacity building, a research across technology, across our engineering capacity, financial services and products, regulatory policies. So these are the things we should do. These are things that more developed countries have done in this area, and that is yielding results across board. Next slide, please. And then the challenges, of course, like I mentioned, there are challenges we will face, but thankfully there are things we can do to really confront those challenges. We all know there is huge financing requirements in energy transition, yes, but if we put things in place, if we have an investment-friendly environment, we are going to see all this capital flow into our markets. There are so much money out there trying to invest into clean energy. So what we need to do is put things in place, make our environment friendly, and all this capital will flow towards us. Then there's that lack of technology. We don't have local technology, like I mentioned earlier. We need to really start investing in research and building capacity. And of course, PhD researchers, we have the doctor here from University of Aberdeen. Things like that are already happening. We should be thinking about doing all these things and prepare ourselves for the future. Make our policies, We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like I said, a lot of policies, a lot of things are already working out there. All we need to do, if we get it, we'll make it specific to our jurisdiction, because we all know what we need. And if we make it specific to us, we know what works for us, and be very determined with a strong political will to make things happen. Infrastructure are there. I would like to say lucky for us, we don't already have a lot of infrastructure to decommission. We are building new ones. So all we need to do is build resilient ones. Every new infrastructure should be made compatible with future. That's what is happening. Even in Germany now, Germany is building new LNG terminals because of Russia issue, LNG terminals, and they're fast tracking this building. But one thing about those, they're also incorporating the compatibility for hydrogen in those terminals. So those are the kind of things we'll be thinking about. Build infrastructure that are resilient, that are future-proof. Next slide, please. And yes, the example, like I mentioned, I've used UK here. UK example, everybody knows what is happening in the UK. UK has been very successful about energy transition. They've been leading globally on matters of energy transition. And there's huge emphasis on decarbonizing the electricity system and then pushing for electrification in everything they're doing. And how are they doing it? It's just a political will. And then that robust strategy that is developed. This strategy constantly, every time they look at it, review it, update it to make it fit for purpose. These are things we can do. And there are so many mechanisms also there, incentive to really attract investment in the sector in the UK. A very successful example on that is the Contract for Difference, CFD, which has really helped the wind energy in the UK to drive down the cost of technology. Now, currently in offshore wind in the UK, 10 years ago, offshore wind was so expensive in the UK. Nobody want to go there. Nobody want to invest in it. But today, with some mechanism like CFD, it's a it's really cheap now. It can actually compete with traditional gas plants at the moment in terms of power generation. So these are things we should be doing. Develop incentives and mechanisms to support all these activities. I've listed some of those benefits there. Again, they are not exhaustive. There are so many benefits of this sort of mechanism. If you want to go to the next slide, please, just let's briefly see some of the benefits in graph. If you look at the first graph there, the transition, just between 4 years interval, between 2014 and 2018, you see what they've seen in terms of capacity, increasing the capacity of renewable, and that's because of those benefits from those mechanisms. If you see there, renewable are just increased very tremendously on that side, closing the gap for coal winding down while renewable is increasing. And another important insight from this graph is the fact that gas plants are still there. And if you look at it, both sides, they're still there. They are still providing those base load. So this is not basically a threat it's just to diversify. Like I said, that's the way I like to say it. So gas is still there to provide the base load, and we can still do all this, build our efficient gas generating plants, while increasing our renewable portfolios as well, on-grid and off-grid renewable portfolio. Another benefit from there, you can see the cost of electricity is gone down tremendously. I mentioned earlier about the offshore wind. You see where it was in 2017 and how it has fallen, competing with gas power plants as well. And then if you look at the projections, you see how renewable is really increasing while coal is winding down. So these are things we can benefit if we really implement very good strategy. And if we build very good strategy, develop very good mechanisms to incentivize investment. Investors will come and this investment will flow. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Ibe. I mean, I listened to your talk, and one could easily see that the point you're emphasizing here is for there to be a mindset shift from this competitive, attitude between offshore oil and gas and renewables in the context of the energy transition, to viewing it more as an opportunity and maximizing that opportunity. Thank you so much. We'll come to questions and interactions after everyone has spoken, but I'll hand over to Christian here to share his thoughts. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and for giving me the chance to speak in this forum. I think I'm going to be brief, really, because a lot of the points that I wanted to make have already been brilliantly made. So I'm going to start to go into some aspects that have to do with mining specifically, and I'm going to use the framework of the EIA with the Net Zero by 2050 report. I'll try to build some kind of frame to look at Africa in the future, if that's okay. Just touching on some points and building on the brilliant presentation that we have just seen now. So if we look at what the IEA is telling us in that report, is that society wants a world where no additional gas is needed from the point where that report was published, which was last year. And there are a number of conditions for any remaining gas, let alone oil. I'm going to focus on gas because of the massive growth that we're seeing in some areas of Southeast Asia, for example, 500%, and in China and in India and in Europe. I mean, LNG is driving a huge amount of demand. And so if we focus on that report and we contrast that, there is the report is telling us civil society to achieve a 1.5 degree scenario, we have to be, we don't need more gas. The gas that is remaining needs to be basically below 0.2% of methane leakage. And we know that the global average is around 3%. We don't know yet because we haven't been able to measure it accurately everywhere. But we have new devices in the form of satellites, in the form of cameras. I mean, there are a number of different technologies that are being very quickly put in place to measure methane leakage. So 0.2% below. The interesting thing is that some markets are starting to look at that, the largest markets like Europe, but also we know that others like Japan and others are looking at putting an entry restriction for gas that mirrors that 0.2% of methane leakage. Basically, any gas that cannot prove that methane leakage has gone below 0.2%, then it's going to be tricky to access those markets. And if we think about the cost curve, and we think about where the most competitive countries sit in terms of the cost curve, their projects going forward, how could actually put in place the technologies to be below 0.2% of methane, and so on. It raises the question on whether gas is the best place to put our bets in Africa. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm not saying I don't believe in the capacity of African countries to develop their gas projects. I'm just saying that there are a number of headwinds that may be coming, and may be coming stronger and stronger. And so one could also react to that saying, well, look, we still have our reserves. We have been investing in those. We need those to grow. We need those to lead development. And if there's demand, we're going to develop them. Now, coming from the mining industry and from ICMM, which is a very, I would say, special association in the sense that we have, as a mining organization, two stars that we follow. One is the SDGs and the other one is the Climate Paris Agreement. So we work with the 26 CEOs that represent our council to understand how the mining industry can help us to achieve those two North Stars, or to get, to deliver to those stars. So if we think about that, and we think about the opportunity of African countries to have a broader portfolio that, it's not locked only on gas, but goes broader than that. And we think about the points that we're making before, also in terms of access to electricity, but then making the obvious point on what could replace or balance a dependency on gas exports in the form of LNG, which is the story about growth and income for African countries. What could come and really give African countries a portfolio that is aligned with a 1.5 degree scenario, delivers to the SDGs, and opens an opportunity for transformation? Now, we could explore mining. The same report and the World Energy report that the IEA publishes every year shows that if we think that countries are going to be pushing for a 1.5 degree scenario, minerals and metals are going to be the most traded materials in the world going forward, and by 2050 for sure. But now we need to stop and step back and think about what the characteristics of those minerals and metals need to be for those to be accepted. Because if we're saying that gas is going to have some characteristics or needs to have some characteristics to enter the largest markets, it's very likely that any metal or mineral that is exploited in Africa or in any part of the world will start to face some requirements to enter the largest markets in the world. So what those could be? For sure, we will have to prove that those minerals and metals are aligned with a 1.5-degree scenario. So the carbon content of every mineral and metal produced and exported will have to have some sort of passport that shows that that's the case. The other point is that they will for sure need to demonstrate that they are at least not going against the SDGs. So they are not fueling war, they are not going against human rights, at least like the very basic element. For sure, they will have to show that the countries and the companies involved are paying their fair share of taxes, and that to some degree it will be an advantage and to some point a requirement to show that they are delivering to the SDGs, not only going against but delivering to. So if we take those indicators on the potential opportunity that African countries could have on minerals and metals going forward, there's an interesting first conclusion. If we're going to be looking at minerals and metals, because of the huge demand and the material intensity of the energy transition, looking at any electric vehicle, renewable energy, wind farms, solar panels, and the broader infrastructure is orders of magnitude more mineral and metal intensive than oil and gas and traditional energy. If we believe that that is an opportunity, how we mine the products, it's even more important than how much we mine, on whether we can match the demand, but how, what are the characteristics of these mineral products as we mine them? Going back to the KPIs that I was describing, being zero carbon, aligned with the SDGs and so on. So whatever opportunity that we explore in Africa needs to bring that mentality of a mining operation that is regenerative, that is circular, that has all the devices to be net zero, and to be able to position their minerals and metals in a way that is aligned with the endpoint. Okay? If we don't do that, and we start to try to replicate the current conditions of the current mine, we will have to transition as we go. And that might be another option that we would like to take. But we just need to think about how to position any new investment in Africa as a winning investment. And so that's point one. The second point that I want to get to is, if we think about those conditions being a net zero operation, a regenerative operation, in the sense that we get the land and we have the natural-based solutions close to that mine, and we have the renewable energy close to that mine, and we have a piece of land that is not defined by the mining operation itself, but by all the other investments that are around, we start to see that Africa actually has the best conditions potentially in the world, depending on where we talk in Africa. We know it's a big continent, but broadly speaking, there are extremely good opportunities to be sitting at the very beginning of the cost curve in the new mining operation proposition, because of the super low cost of renewable energy in Africa, because of the fact that you will have to be connected to the mine, if you want to be linked to zero carbon operations, because of the extra capacity that a mining operation could be providing in renewable energy, the capacity to produce green hydrogen, not only for the transportation of the mine, but for the logistics of the mine. The capacity of providing natural-based solutions in the form of agriculture and forestry. So again, very low in the cost curve in those. So you can envision a mine in Africa that is surrounded by a number of other aspects that makes the proposition beyond mining. We can think about the jobs that could come at the different levels with different requirements that are not locked into the life mine, but are also bringing opportunity in the life with very good salaries and also procurement opportunities. So to finish off, I want to say, when we think about the future of Africa, let's think about the natural advantages that Africa can have for that future, not necessarily the natural advantages that Africa has had in the past and how to extend those, but to think about the opportunity in minerals and metals in a new model of mining that could bring an opportunity for Africa beyond mining with all the other investments around the operation. Positioning the metals and minerals that go out from that operation as with unique access to the markets because of the conditions that they have been mined. And then obviously linking to the circular economy as those minerals and metals build the stock that we need to circularize in the future in the largest markets like Europe, China, Japan, and so on. So I'll leave it there for now, but I'll leave you with those thoughts at this point.
Thank you very much, Christian. Again, really, really interesting conversation there, trying to encourage a more proactive approach to designing what appears to be an integrated and indeed very sophisticated energy system that interacts with one another, but at the same time prioritizing SDGs and all similar issues. Thank you so much for that. And then I'll hand over to Jamie at this point for the final talk before we then have a general discussion on some of the issues that have been raised. Over to you, Jamie.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Wifa. And thanks for the opportunity to talk. Sorry that we can't be there in person at the summit. Over the last few years at Imperial College, I've been working with the Sustainable Gas Institute, heading up a thing called the White Paper Series, where we have tried to tackle some of the contentious or difficult subjects around gas and its future. And I'm going to draw out a few of the points that occur to me from that work. And the first one is really a scene-setting one, and it's been mirrored in what you've heard already, is that when we look at the scenarios that have been used to plot out potential routes to our climate goals, particularly the ones used by the IPCC in their assessment report process, there is an agreement, although there is variability, that gas across the globe, gas use will decrease, particularly in the second half of the century, but in very many scenarios in the not too distant future, decreasing to 2050. However, there's still a lot of gas in the mix for a number of countries, even those with the most stringent climate targets. And that raises the pertinent question, of course, what to do with that gas, to make best use of gas's valuable characteristics without endangering our ability to meet any of our ambitious climate goals. And that is also a key question for the African region as a whole, and Nigeria particularly, given the large export proportion of the economy that gas makes up. There's a number of ways that we can help with that contraction of gas and try to reduce emissions. We've heard a number of different approaches already. But one interesting one that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and is getting more and more attention across the research discourse is the use of hydrogen. And I think there are a number of ways in which hydrogen is a very interesting and useful vector. First of all, it can do all of the things that other energy vectors can do. It can be used in electricity production, for domestic heating and cooking. It can be used for storage. It can be used as a tactic to deal with renewables curtailment in things like power to gas projects. And there are also a number of different routes to get to hydrogen. We've heard a little bit about green and blue hydrogen, hydrogen coming from renewables, or hydrogen coming from natural gas. And there are various flavors of those approaches. So it has a versatility that is useful. Gas as a vector is something that's more inherently storable and more inherently transportable than electricity. And so while I wouldn't say that this should be characterized as a debate between whether we should use electricity or hydrogen / gas vectors, and it's clear that electricity and low carbon electricity is going to do quite a lot of the heavy lifting to reduce global emissions and across various regions and globally. I think that there is a very interesting role that hydrogen can play, and that it's something that we need to get right in order to maximize its benefit. Another thing that is worth considering is that whilst, as has been commented already, gas infrastructure across Africa as a whole and in Nigeria is developing, there has been a lot of work in the last decade to develop significant gas infrastructure and increasing mileage of gas pipelines, and also a lot of regulatory work in order to get those pipelines working better, to reduce the friction of access for operators. I think the new Nigerian gas network code is now only maybe a couple of years old, and all of that great work. If we don't want to strand that effort and abandon it, then we should consider opportunities to reuse those assets and all of that hard regulatory work. And hydrogen can play a role there too. And there has been a lot of research, particularly across Europe, on how to utilize hydrogen in natural gas assets at various different levels within the pressure tiers of gas infrastructure, all the way from high pressure transmission right down to local distribution gas pipelines. That's could be a great benefit to Nigeria, whose assets are relatively young, and therefore the cost of stranding those assets is relatively high. Another point, of course, this is the benefit of going last, is that everybody has touched on a number of the points that I'm making here. But another key point, I think, is the role of hydrogen in international energy trade. And Christian was alluding there to the LNG market decreasing over time and what might fill that gap. Minerals might become for Nigeria and for other African nations particularly important tradable commodities. But I'd argue that also there is a significant potential for hydrogen to play a role in that space too. And as a historical net exporter of natural gas and with a large gas resource, blue hydrogen might be a route to tradable hydrogen, which can be moved around the world as a liquefied product, much like liquefied natural gas, but also other energy carriers like ammonia or liquid organic hydrogen carriers. So there are different ways that we could do this, and those, the winner in those transportation technologies is still to be discovered. But there's a great amount of work to do there, and countries with an interest in exporting energy, like Nigeria, could play a key role in helping develop, being a site for demonstration projects, and being a partner to countries who want to buy hydrogen on the international market. There are a number of key things that have been identified in a number of studies, particularly a recent study by the IEA looking at what we need to get hydrogen international trade off the ground. Key things include setting targets and long-term policy signals to give confidence to investment, and demand-side support, so support for the uses of these commodities at the other end, mitigating investment risk through government support mechanisms, promoting R&D and demonstration and knowledge transfer. And the last one, which I think in some ways is almost the most important, is harmonizing standards and regulations. Much in the way Christian was talking about access to markets for natural gas needing to prove levels of, for example, methane emissions associated with the supply chain of those energy units. It's incredibly important that future traded hydrogen has some form of certification scheme that is internationally recognized, so that sellers and buyers understand explicitly what that unit really entails, and there's confidence that would support trade there. So there are a number of things that need to be worked out, not just technically, but also regulatory, and countries like Nigeria could play a key role in helping develop exactly what those things look like in the future. Which leads quite nicely, I think, to international cooperation as being a key a lever in developing the future global energy system, particularly as it pertains to hydrogen. There's already a number of key collaborations in place across Africa as a region, and in Nigeria specifically. Ones that I'm aware of include the African Hydrogen Partnership, HISA in South Africa. Uganda have spent some time looking at hydrogen as a facilitator of energy access using hydrogen batteries. There is the German-Nigerian Hydrogen Office, and a host of green hydrogen projects across in North Africa, which all show, I think, a quickly increasing interest in collaborations of this sort across the world. Interestingly, in the most recent IPCC Working Group 3 report, which deals with the energy mitigation questions that help, if answered, help us get to 1.5 degree futures, highlights specifically the role of these types of collaborations and potentially the efficiency of those types of investments, bringing the best bang for your buck, if you like, in terms of decarbonization potential. So, hopefully a very important area for the future. The last one, if I can, just before I finish, is a point that I think is very important to make, because I think it's often missed out of these types of discussions around hydrogen. We must not forget that the ultimate goal here is to reduce emissions. And hydrogen in and of itself is not necessarily low emissions. We need to be laser focused on making sure that all of these projects have the goal of tracking the full supply chain of their emissions, so that we can ensure that the hydrogen unit that's produced in the end meets the prime criteria, which is that it is significantly lower emissions than the alternatives. Now, for hydrogen, this is extra challenging because hydrogen, if you compare to electricity, it has efficiency issues in terms of the round turn efficiency, which can lead to it being less greenhouse gas efficient than electricity. At worst, it can be dirtier than natural gas if you consider blue hydrogen, or if you consider brown hydrogen rather, so hydrogen produced from natural gas with no CCS component. And at best, if you compare it with the best electricity, there is likely to be always a margin because of the supply chain issues associated even with green hydrogen, where we have to consider the units of energy and therefore emissions associated with producing renewable energy. One of the great benefits that the renewable resource in Africa has is that it's likely to be amongst the best places in the world to site solar, for example. And so with that increased insulation and high level of solar efficiency, the green hydrogen units that you get out of that, assuming that you are using the most efficient electrolyzers, are likely to be some of the cleanest units of hydrogen that you can produce. But of course, there are a range of caveats there, and we need to make sure that through regulation and through certification that we do understand the carbon intensity of those hydrogen units that have been produced, and we therefore give the market confidence that what is being traded and what is being used is indeed low greenhouse gas emissions. That's everything from me. Thanks very much for the time, and happy to take questions or to discuss any of those points. We can't hear you, Dr. Weaver.
Yeah, it's the usual thing with being online. You don't realize you've muted yourself. Anyway, thank you so much, Jamie. Again, your talk does review the complexity of the issue and the fact that there is really no silver bullet. I was hoping to get one from all three of your presentations, but there seems to be none. And we're having even more complex systems, more integrated systems. I was looking online, and you're seeing Denmark and Germany all coming together now designing energy islands that would include, wind turbines, hydrogens, and waves and tidal and all of that. So, we're really dealing with really very sophisticated energy systems here. And of course, designing that system, does take a lot. It does take a lot of technology, capacity, funding, and even the willingness to move in these directions, because scenarios continue to evolve. Just to let you catch your breath there, Jamie, I'd like to jump to Uche very quickly. And Uche, you made a point about an opportunity here and how Nigeria and indeed other African countries can seize the opportunity and look at this thing less with a view that is not necessarily a competition between fossil fuels and renewables. But then again, on the flip side, when one considers the amount of time a country like Nigeria, has been, involved in fossil fuels with not very much to show for it. Don't you then see the energy transition stage as sort of a revolutionary opportunity to seize that in the short and especially in the long term, rather than almost going on business as usual? Because it might be that there's a tendency that it then becomes an excuse to be in some ways complacent. How would you respond to that?
Okay, Doctor, thank you very much. And yeah, I perfectly understand what you're saying. But again, if you look, like I said to you, I was talking from the perspective, from the background of knowing the market in Nigeria. And you're quite absolutely correct. We've been in that oil and gas business or industry for a very long time without a lot to show for it, to be honest. But yes, that's why it's difficult for us, and that's why the authorities and the government and if we don't really, we can't, in terms of change, it's a big change. And then again, if we don't leverage on what we have, if we just say we want to have that steep change, it might be more difficult for us, and it might be more difficult to also get the buy-in from the authorities. So I think the basic or the best approach or strategy for us will be stand from where we are firm, and then move step by step away from where we are. Oil and gas, like I said, a lot of resistance you see in energy transition in Nigeria is from that school of thought that is a threat to oil and gas. So if you can't come to really explain that narrative that it's not a threat, come off it, let's diversify. Let's start from there. Let's diversify. Then if we now begin to bring in these other new technologies with time, gradually increase our investments, begin to diversify the portfolio, down, increase our investment in renewables, that makes our renewable capacities, begin to come up in hydrogen. Jamie talked about demonstration projects. I don't see any reason why a country like Nigeria shouldn't be thinking about demonstration in hydrogen at this point in time. We should be thinking about that, doing all this. So this one, when we begin to do it and then get into it, see the whole economics, the whole reason to do this, see everything, then gradually we'll be moving away from oil and gas. And at the same time, we will be building capacity as well. We talked about being in oil and gas. This is the same thing I used to tell people. We've been in oil and gas for a very long time, but we don't even have any of the technologies. We can't develop oil and gas field now purely from Nigerian-based supply chain. It's difficult. We can't do that. A lot of these technologies, we still need to be sourced from somewhere else. But here is a new industry where all the countries, everybody are struggling to really own a particular side of that industry. Germany today tomorrow they want to be the giants in electrolyzer. That's the same thing with every other places. So it's a very good opportunity for us to start, keep investing, get the money we are getting from our efficient oil and gas operation, at least in the short to medium term. Get those money, invest it in clean energy, build capacity, diversify. With time, we're targeting net zero, but with time, naturally, we will shift.
Again, thank you very much for that response. I do agree with the points you raised. Unfortunately, I think these conversations, we need to start having them in forums where actions that can be taken, and I think that's where you make the point about political will, because the resistance is because of the nature of the point resource, and then I try to expect or hope that we could move from the nature of the resource, which is a point resource, to something a lot more broader and more diversified. But then I have a question here for Christian. And it's kind of with regards to critical minerals. We do agree that critical minerals will play a fundamental role in the energy transition, and we are beginning to see that in a number of ways. If we are to again, I know this is a tricky one, and would require some degree of modeling. But aren't we getting with the political economy of speed and the pressures exerted on critical minerals, aren't we getting to a point where we're taking the problem from one sector and then planting it in another? And how what are those barriers and how can that be avoided?
That's an excellent question. That's a very, very good question. And it's not that we don't have minerals and mineral production in Africa, right? So we can also look at the experience of mineral and metal production in Africa to see where your question is coming from. And I think the point that I was trying to make with my presentation is that there is one route that there is one route that I think is viable, which is to extend the current model of minerals and mining in volume. Not to see there is demand coming, and so for those minerals and metals that are required, we need to increase volume. And there are reserves for many of those minerals, actually some of the most critical ones. So that's one route. The other route, which is the one that I was suggesting to think about a little bit more deeper, is how if we redefine minerals and metals production, but more generally supply, in the future, and why if we ask ourselves, what if we want to be the winning offering in the world? If we're sitting now in 2030 and in 2050, and we see that the minerals and metals coming from Africa are winning, are wanted, they have a particular push, they have a priority to come into those markets. Are we talking copper just for the sake of copper, or is it copper mined in a certain way? Is it copper going to a specific stock in Africa and in China with the promise, and more than the promise, with the regulatory framework that copper will be circularized in Africa and in Europe? Is that copper fostering job creation, not only in mining, but fostering job creation in renewable energy that has allowed zero carbon production, in green hydrogen that has allowed the very large haul trucks to become zero carbon, in climate-based solutions that has allowed the net zero carbon, and more broadly, all of this investment led to fair access to job creation and the broader SDG agenda. Is that copper going to be the same copper as compared with copper that comes from another operation that has none of those credentials, where you don't know if it's driving progress, if you don't know the carbon content of it? So I think the answer to the question goes into your transformational point. It might sound that those two coppers are the same copper, and when we look to the deposit on Earth, they are the same copper, but the conditions that lead to the extraction process and then supply, and then actually I will go further into the use of that copper. If we can work as African countries, as a region, to make sure that people understand that copper, let alone copper, could be iron ore, it could be cobalt, it's, whatever the resource we want to, gold, whatever mineral and metal that access that large market, comes with the recognition that it's different, that it's driving progress in the form of the SDGs and is aligned and pushing ahead with the climate agreement. That will be a new proposition. If we want to do something different, we may jump into the problems that you're raising, and we will have to deal with them as that transition takes place. So that's why my suggestion was, let's look at the transformational agenda and think, how could we embrace that?
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. Again, these are conversations that we would ordinarily need a week to sit down and unpack. But again, we have to do this in just about an hour. But Jamie, I think it's at this point I'd come to you. And you did capture very nicely the challenges with natural gas and the likelihood of decline in time to come. And then this idea of hydrogen. And I come to the point of scalability. And my question is, would you consider, it's two-faced question, but would you consider hydrogen a low-hanging fruit for for a country like Nigeria and other developing countries? And what are those pathways to scalability that you think we might be able to capitalize on?
I mean, low-hanging fruit, I think, would be a stretch. It's certainly an opportunity that talks to many of the conditions that exist in Nigeria. You have gas to spare. you have traditionally exported in Nigeria, and there is a question about what to do with that resource. Mm-hmm. If we look also at the assets that have been developed in country, and Nigeria has spent a lot of time and effort getting that right, and to strand that asset is quite expensive. But there's still obviously a lot of work to do. You might see that the lowest hanging fruit, if I can make that relative, is to start thinking about blue hydrogen, because you immediately have a scalability option there. You can build large SMR. We know how much that's likely to cost. The CCS component of that, of course, is very, very challenging, which is why you can't say an unequivocal low-hanging fruit is in this option, because there have been many failed policy processes to try and get CCS off the ground. And being based in Aberdeen, Dr. Weaver, you'll be as close to some of those failed policy attempts as anybody else. So you really need to get that right. And as I tried to make in my last point, there is no point in doing this if we can't make sure that it is indeed very low greenhouse gas emissions. It will never be zero emissions, although there is the potential to make hydrogen with negative emissions if you use biomass as your route to hydrogen with CCS. But if we talk about a slightly more core path to hydrogen being blue hydrogen, then there is an opportunity for scalability there that is slightly more immediate. If we look at green hydrogen, there is a lot of work right now looking at larger scale electrolyzers. So we could move from the kind of small demonstration scale of electrolysis to something that looks a little bit more like, producing, plants that produce thousands of kilos of hydrogen a day. There's a particular project funded here in the UK called GigaStack, which is looking at doing exactly that. And there is certainly something to be proved in terms of the cost reduction capable, because as an electrochemical technology, it doesn't necessarily enjoy the same scale factors that, say, a steam methane reforming plant might enjoy. As you make it bigger, the volume increases significantly, and you save a lot of money. That is being proved now for larger scale electrolyzers. So that is more of a challenge. But you can begin to see that there is a route starting with blue hydrogen, moving to green hydrogen, and that it may be that industrial interest and commercial interest in those projects becomes a very good anchor for genuine demonstration of CCS projects, good demonstration of the supply chain. And then by the time green hydrogen is more mature and costs have been driven down, then there is an open and functioning market that green hydrogen can play into. That's, of course, a scenario that has lots of challenges on the critical path, and it's so I would hesitate to call any of that a low-hanging fruit. But you can see that there is a way through there, and you can see that there is an international interest that would mean that Nigeria wouldn't be going alone if it tried to move in this direction, that it would be working with international collaboration with a view to an international market, and that might be a way in which things have a critical mass and can get done.
Fantastic. I see we're running out of time here, but just some final words, takeaways, if you may. Could you Ibe, could you just give us some final words from your presentation? What would be the takeaway that you think people should pay some attention to?
Yeah, the takeaway there, Dr. Weaver, is simple. We have to leverage the resources we have, and we have to leverage the resources we have and gradually move into this future. The future is happening, no doubt it's happening, and Nigeria should stop seeing it as a threat to oil and gas. It's happening. It's an opportunity we have to really grab. It's an opportunity for us to really diversify our energy mix. So yes, and we have everything we need, like I said, to go in there. And there is that international interest, like Jamie said here already. But we really need to start getting our acts together and then attract every collaboration we need to attract. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to you, Christian. Just some final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would say we tend to think about this transformation as daunting or as it's difficult to think about or to square. Let's embrace this transformation as one of the opportunities that Africa, has been waiting for, a couple of decades, and one that to try to put in place will take at least a decade. So let's embrace the transformation. Let's look at how to do it, what is required. Let's break down the transformational milestones in steps that we can digest. But let's not fear the transformation. Let's go ahead. And even if we go the route of gas and blue hydrogen and let's think about all the opportunities. And if you need to store that CO2, just going beyond just storing it, but can you become a world leader as a region in how do you capture the carbon, store the carbon, trade the carbon, utilize the carbon, all around carbon? You become a carbon solutions expert in the world, which is a skill that will be required everywhere in any scenario. So let's embrace this transformation. Let's talk with the financial institutions to attract the capital with special terms that are not too constrictive. And let's take these next 10 years as a fantastic opportunity for what Africa has been waiting for so long.
Thank you so much. And over to you, Jamie. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, the headlines are, hydrogen is not a solution to everything, but it could be a really useful part of the puzzle. And it may have a great opportunity in Nigeria and in other parts of Africa where the conditions are right. I think to build on Uchenna's point about this fear that there's a threat to the oil and gas industry, if you flip that on its head, the existence of an oil and gas industry with significant amount of experience is a great asset. There's a great engineering experience. There's a great experience in dealing with in international projects and working with international partners. And those are all of the things that are needed to get any of these other types of projects off the ground, but particularly hydrogen projects. So, maybe there is a great amount of expertise within that industry that, if it's just pointed in a slightly different direction, is a great basis on which to build the next energy economy for the world.
Thank you very much. Again, it's been a pleasure listening to you all and just trying to absorb it. But again, I think the point is clear. There are a few things that are clear. One is the fact that the world as we know it is changing. Energy systems as we've known it is evolving and changing. And parts of the world that are proactive and redesigning and rethinking their energy governance systems and structures to accommodate this change and even make the most of it. So it wouldn't matter whether you're in the UK or in Nigeria, you will feel the pain if you don't adjust to this change. Energy geopolitics is already playing a role as we see, and further makes it even more complex. And so if regions and countries like Nigeria and other countries in Africa do not begin to take a proactive stance to rethink and redesign and plan their energy governance systems to be able to accommodate the pressures that are to come, then there would be trouble. It's been a pleasure. This is me signing out on behalf of everyone, and I hope we can continue this conversation some other time. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.